Executive Director to address something that the town was speaking of as far as the 35%, because I do think that's in line with what the city. Okay, yes. And we have to rush because the 10 minutes over time this year.
Yes, ma'am. As the board well know, we probably vetted this issue of 35%. We can attain the DBE goal of 35%. We can equally exceed it. However, the attainability based on availability and ability of any particular DBE is based on several criteria. When the DBEs are qualified, if they're able to perform the contract, that will be determined by several criteria that will be set or that are set in the DBE procedure, not in this policy. And those criteria are specifically laid out. They are public records, and any member of the public can pick up a copy of the DBE policy once it's approved by the superintendent. The ability and availability also determine whether we will be able to attain the 35% goal. Now, like I indicated, we can exceed it, depending on the dollar amount and all other factors being equal. So 35% is not a low goal. It's not the only goal we can attain. Sometimes the general contractor might allow us to exceed that goal, saying, look, I want to give more percentage to more people, the subcontractors. And that will give us the leverage to achieve a higher level. However, even if our goal is 20%, again, it depends on what we're able to achieve. You may not have a subcontractor sufficient in the local area to achieve 35%. You may not have a sufficient subcontractors that are qualified or even willing or interested to achieve any particular goal. Based on these criteria that will be set out in the policy procedure, then we can determine what percentage goal we can be able to attain or that is attainable in a particular contract.
Madam Chair, please. My concern was that the language of the policy allows for 0% and up. The language of the policy. So if your intent is to give as much as 35%, can you please set a minimum? Or can you do something to make sure, to ensure that in your policy, there is no room for a 0%, a 1%, a 2%, a 3%? If this is truly, if this is truly...
That way is not to box ourselves in, give ourselves the room to be able to see what percentage that we can attain.
That gives you the legal protection, sir. That gives you the legal protection to give black business owners 1%. That gives you the legal protection. That's what that language does.
No, that's not correct.
That's not what it's actually saying.
Well, then you need to change your language, because when we get down to a court of law, all you business owners here, you're going to be in trouble. The language says up to 5%, which means it could start as low as 0%.
Mr. Aaron?
Why not take up to just a business goal of 35%? We won't be doing.
She's saying legal, so I'm calling on you, even though our new executive is an attorney, I'm calling on you.
35% is probably the highest percentage that any local jurisdiction can come up with. The city of New Orleans is 35%. The city of Waterford is 35%. Other political subdivisions have much less. The 35% is a number that recognizes what the availability is post-Katrina, what the ability level is post-Katrina, and avoids the problem of you being a mandate, if you will, by saying it has to be 35%.
How many have reached their goal of 35%? I mean, since you call those two agencies out.
I think the closest is probably the city of New Orleans.
What is it?
I don't know what the exact number is.
What I know, nobody don't know.
No, I think
I'm not disputing the 35%, you guys. I am disputing the minimum. The minimum, which is 0. 0%. You're not addressing that, and I believe you understand what I'm saying, but nobody wants to address it.
Ma'am, I fully understand what you're saying, and if you let me speak. You can't set a floor, because there has to be a rational justification for the percentage that you pick. It has to have a rational relationship to availability and ability of contractors. So if you set 5% as a goal and there are no DBEs qualified in that particular area, it's going to be, you can't reach the 5%. So you have to look at it on a case-by-case basis and determine what is realistic in that particular situation. So The likelihood of having a 1%, I doubt if you're going to have it. I think you're probably going to end up with ranges probably at the lowest end, maybe 15% or something like that. You're probably going to.
That's state law, federal law.
Do you see that?
Mr. Aaron, I just want to make something, clarify something. Is it not true that if we set a minimum, that is illegal and unconstitutional?
I think it would.
You cannot set a minimum set aside. You cannot set a set aside. It has to always be a goal. This is how you get a policy that is effective and legal.
I'm not, what you call it, a goal. All I'm saying is.
You can't have a minimum. You can't set a minimum. It's illegal to set a minimum.
Check with your lawyer about that. Check with your lawyer.
Madam Chair?
That's all.
Again,
Yes.
I see hands continue to go up. We had one card, one comment, and
It's always good to have the public.
Madam Chair, we just, matter of procedure and compliance, have the folks fill out a card that did speak, and
Okay.
again, in the future,
All right.
make sure that folks.
Okay.
Actually, if you don't mind filling out one for the record.
You've had your hand up for a while, sir, so I'll allow you to speak, since you traveled to come here to speak at the committee meeting.
Yeah, Edward
State
Parker.
your name, please.
Edward Parker. I'm with NAACP, and along with you, my dear, we're not satisfied with the so-called 35%. All right, whatever's legal has to be legal. All right. Talk to me about compliance. Will Mr. Bright be the compliance officer? Who will watch over these contracts to make sure that the compliance part is adhered to? And when we talk about the percentages, what about the primes, DBEs being used as primes?
Okay, let me say something, Mr. Green. What you're saying is, what we're trying to get accomplished here today is the policy. These policies